Hi, I'm Paul. Welcome to Skip the Rules, the show that lets you avoid trudging through a rulebook and get straight into an exciting new board game. Now this week we get a chance to live out our megalomaniacal tendencies in Citadels. This is a card game which hands you the reins of an entire kingdom of untold promise. But unfortunately there's a problem, it's not built yet. By donning the guises of nobles, middle-classmen and some underworld characters, it's up to you to forge it for yourself. You must manage resources, avoid some conspiracies and hatch a few dastardly plots of your own if you're going to succeed. Let's skip the rules. Citadels is a game where each player is out for themselves, and although during the ebb and flow of the game you will have alliances form and break, there can only be one winner. Now each player is going to be asked to take on the mantle of not just one person but an entire kingdom. You're going to be asked to use the abilities of your subjects to further your goals. And before we can get into the nuts and bolts of the game, we need to see what tools are available for your modern day kingdom builder. Not going to need this. The first thing you're going to find is a token. This token is your crown and simply going to tell you who's in charge of proceedings each turn. The next set of tokens you're going to find is your gold coins. These are the currency of the game and the things you're going to be spending in order to build the new sections of your kingdom. Although Citadels is a fairly simple game, you're also provided with some summary cards. These are just a way of each person making sure they know exactly what they should be doing each turn. The next thing you're going to find is your character cards. Your character cards are the roles that each of your group members are going to take on each turn. They each one provide you with a special ability that you can use to further your goals. The main bulk of the game is taken up by the district cards. The district cards are the sections you're going to be building in your brand new kingdom, and in the case of some of them, actually provide you with special abilities that you can use throughout the game.
Peak.
The final set of cards you're going to find in the box are the expansion. Now, as is becoming standard practice these days with most card games, the first expansion, Dark Cities, ships with the basic box set. This adds a few extra characters and a few new districts that can be substituted for existing rules. These add a few more mechanics and a bit of extra flavour to the game. The game's out the box now, let's start playing. Citadels can be played with anywhere between 2 and 8 players. We're going to first off focus on the 4 to 6 player game, and then we'll look at any additional rules later on. Now for those of you not familiar with Skip the Rules, we've got John, Josh and Joe. The first thing we need to do is allocate the king token. This is the crown.
Thank you very much. I'm the king because I'm the oldest of this group. If this causes any consternation between any of the young whippersnappers present, it can be easily allocated using any kind of random number generator.
Like a dice?
Like a dice.
Like a dice. In Citadels, the character cards aren't allocated at the start of the game, so take these cards and place them in a pile in the middle of the table. Each of your group is also going to be taking on the role of a noble, so it makes sense that they've got some inherited wealth. Each player should be given 2 gold coins at the start of the game, and the rest of them then should simply be piled up in the middle of the table. Each of your players is also going to be in possession of some land represented by the district cards. Each person needs to be dealt 4 of these cards, and that represents their starting hand. There's no set rule as to who or how these cards are dealt, but it may be that you'd like your king to take on the role of dealer for the first turn. The dealer should start by shuffling the district card deck. He'll then choose 4 random cards to allocate to each player. Those cards will then form their starting hand.
Thanks, John. Once each player has got their hand of cards, they should keep them secret from the other players. This is because the district cards that make up their hand may influence the tactics they want to use.
The district cards are your kingdom's blueprints. These are the sections of your city you can build each turn, provided that you've got enough gold. Now, aside from some flavoursome artwork, each card has 2 main features. The first one is a gold value in the top left corner. These indicate not only how much gold that will cost to build that turn, but it also tells you how much the card is worth at the end of the game when it comes to scoring. The next feature is in the bottom left. Now, this is a coloured circle which indicates the card's specialisation. This will link the card to a particular character special ability which will be discussed shortly. Now there's 5 of these. You've got blue, green, yellow. There is also a red, and the final one is purple. The purple cards are what cards that contain special abilities, also indicated by the fact that there's a load of text on them. Now the rules for these are fairly self-explanatory once you know the basic concepts for the game, so we'll look back at these later on. Each player will have an opportunity to build one of these each turn. The game ends once one player has built 8. However, it's not going to necessarily be that person that wins the game. The winner of the game is the player that has the highest combined gold score for any districts he has in play, plus any relevant bonuses. In order to properly explain some of the mechanics for the game, it's easier to break it into 2 sections. Firstly, I'm going to explain what each player can do during their own turn. Then I'll put that into the context of the rest of the game. During each player's turn, they have to follow 3 simple steps. The first is to take a normal round action. This can be either drawing 2 district cards from the top of the district deck, looking at them, choose one, and discard the other. The other thing they can do is to take 2 gold coins from the bank. Next, the player can elect to build a district. He'd look through his hand, find a district that he can afford to build. That is one for which he's got at least the amount of gold indicated on the card, places that card on the table in front of him, and the required amount of gold into the bank.
Now, when building districts, you're only allowed to build any one district once. So, for example, I've already built a church. In my hand I have another church, but I can't build that one.
The final thing the player can do is to use their character's special abilities. We'll go into that in more detail now. The character cards are the main nuts and bolts of the game. Each card has a special unique ability on it which a player can use throughout the game. However, each character card is not permanently allocated to one player. Each turn, a player will choose a character based on what their aim is for that turn. Odds are this decision will be made by what special ability will help them to achieve their aim. The problem is that somebody else could have the same idea, and there's only one of each character card. A lot of the special abilities for these characters is very dependent on the turn order, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at how these character cards are chosen at the start of each turn. Each turn starts off the same way. The king will shuffle the character deck.
I will take one of these cards and place it face down, and 2 of these cards and place it face up. If one of those cards had been the king, which it's not in this example, I would reshuffle that into the deck and choose another card.
Now these characters are now unavailable for the rest of this turn, and the cards that people will choose from will be the remaining deck. Now the rules we've just mentioned there are for a 4-player game, but they change slightly depending on how many players you've got. In a 5-player game, there would only be 1 card placed face up. In a 6 or 7-player game, there would only be the face down card and no cards face up. The reason for some of these cards being face up is to add a little bit of flavour to the game. If you're planning on doing something a little bit devious that turn, you might breathe a sigh of relief to see the assassin taken out of action. Similarly, if you're quite wealthy, you might also be quite happy to see the thief taken out of the game. Next, the king has to look through the remaining cards in his hand and secretly choose the character he'd like to play that turn. The deck is then passed to the next player clockwise around the group. He will choose 1 card, which will be his player for the turn, and then he'll pass it on. Now once the last player has chosen which character they'd like for that turn, they take the remaining characters and place them face down on top of the already discarded character cards. On each character card is a number. That tells you the order in which they take their turn. The assassin has a number 1. That means he'll go first. The Warlord, however, has a number 8. That means he'll be last. The king will call out each number in turn.
Calling number 1.
The player that has the character corresponding to that number will then begin to take his turn. Once his turn is finished, the king will continue to call each number in turn.
Calling number 2.
It's important to note, however, that not every character has been chosen, so that might mean that certain numbers get called without a player taking a turn, so he will continue to call numbers until he reaches one for which a player has been chosen.
Calling number 3.
Now once all 8 numbers have been called and everybody's had a chance to have a go, the turn ends. All of the character cards are then placed back onto the discard pile. The king will shuffle them in order for the sequence to start again. Now it's time to look at each character and decide what deadly or political weapon they've got for use at your whim. Now each character has an ability that you can use once your character's number has been called. Some of these abilities link directly to the game mechanics that we've already talked about. Now your first willing subject is the assassin. As the assassin, the player will at the start of his turn choose one other character. That character will have been murdered. The player who holds that card will not get to have their turn this go. You have to choose wisely, as if you choose a character that's already been discarded this turn, Unfortunately, your ability does nothing and is wasted. The other important thing is that the player who holds the card that has been murdered should probably try their best not to let anybody else know that it's them that's been taken out. For example, if Josh, as the assassin, has decided to kill the merchant, that's the card chosen by John. John needs to act as though it's not him that's been killed, as other players are going to be looking for reactions. It's also important that when the turn moves on and the king calls on number 6, which is the merchant's number, John acts as though it's not his turn. The next character we're going to look at is the thief. The mechanics for the thief are very similar to the assassin in that they have to choose one character on whom to play their ability. The difference is that rather than murdering that person, you're going to be stealing from them instead. When it comes round to that character's turn, the player who is playing that character will have to hand over any gold they have before they take any of their actions. It's also important to note that the thief cannot steal from the assassin because the assassin has already had his turn. It's also probably worth noting that the thief would not want to steal from the assassin's target, as the assassin's target will not get a turn that round. Number 3 is the magician. Now, this is the first character we've got where he's got a choice of 2 abilities. The first one is in case you've got a hand of districts that you don't particularly like. You can take any number of these and discard them. You can then draw that same number of cards from the top of the district deck and they go straight into your hand. The second ability is in case you've maybe only got a couple of cards left, but there's another player who's got an entire hand. You swap your hand with that player and you get theirs. It's important again to note at this point that this time we're talking about the player rather than a character that you need to nominate. The fourth character card is the king. This has 2 abilities. You get to use both. The first one is that means I get the crown token. Thank you. The crown token gives me the ability to shuffle the character card deck next turn, but I also get to choose my character card before anybody else. The next ability it's got is the first instance where we've got a character with an ability linked to a district card. In this case, the yellow ones. This ability allows the king to gain 1 gold piece for each district you have in play. It's important to note, however, this does not count for any districts that are currently in your hand, only those on the table. The bishop, which is the 5th card, has a similar ability, except he'll gain gold for the blue cards that you have in play instead. The secondary ability of the bishop, unlike the magician, can be used as well. This ability links directly to the Warlord and prevents any of the bishop's currently played districts from being destroyed that turn. I'll let you have a guess what the Warlord card does. The merchant card is the card for people that want to rake in a little bit of cash that turn. Now, like the bishop and the king, the merchant allows a player to draw 1 extra gold coin for each of his specialist coloured cards, in this case green. The second ability the merchant possesses allows him to take 1 extra gold after he's taken his normal round action. Now, the architect is the card that you're likely going to plump for if you've got a bit of extra cash and you want to get some of your valuable districts down on the table. The first ability that the architect gives you is to be able to draw 2 cards after you've taken a normal round action. So, for example, you could take 2 gold as your action and then draw 2 cards from the district pile. Similarly, you could draw 2 cards as your action, discard 1, and then draw 2 more into your hand. The second ability that the architect gives you is that it removes the restriction of only building 1 district a turn. The architect can build up to 3 districts from your hand, provided you've got enough gold to do so. The final card is the Warlord. Now, the Warlord, again, can actually claim gold for each of the districts of his colour, in this case red. But the real power of this card comes in his ability to destroy districts. Once per turn, Warlord can elect one of the other player's districts that's already in play. He can then pay gold to destroy it. That card then gets removed from the game and placed into the discard pile. The Warlord has to pay 1 less gold than the card's value to do this. That means that the Warlord can destroy 1 gold value districts for free, 2 gold value districts for 1 gold, 3 gold value for districts for 2 gold, and so on. That gold then has to be paid out of his own stash into the bank. Once a player has played his 8th district, the game will end. The turn itself continues, though, until all 8 characters have been called out by the king. This means that every other player will still get to finish their turn. For example, if the bishop, the 5th character, plays the 8th district, then the merchant, the architect and the warlord will still get to have their go. This is an effort to balance the game and allow every player to have the same number of turns.
These remaining players may wish to change what they're going to do throughout the course of their last turn, as it is their final opportunity to gain some more points before the game ends and the scores are tallied up.
Once the game is over, a winner must be chosen. The winner is the person that scored the most points that game. Now there's several ways to do this. The first one is to tally up how much gold value you've got in your districts in play on the table in front of you. Once that is done, there's several ways to score bonus points. The first is to look at the cards on the table and see whether you've managed to play one of each colour. Now there are 5 colours in total: green, yellow, blue, red and purple. Having one of each of these 5 on the table gives you a bonus 3 points. At this point, everybody needs to tally up their scores. Now, if you were the first player to 8 districts, you'll get a bonus 4 points. If you're the second player to 8 districts, you get a bonus 2 points. Everybody then needs to announce their scores to the group and we decide the winner.
I get 28 plus the 2 bonus, which is 30.
18.
I got a pitiful 10.
22 plus 4 is 26.
Now it's sometimes going to be the case, as with this one, that the first person to 8 won't necessarily be the winner. This may be because they failed to take into account the districts the other players already had down on the table, or the actions they could take in the turns after the end of the game was announced. It may simply be that during the ebb and flow of the game they realised they weren't going to be able to win, and decided instead to just deny another player that top spot. The game rules we've looked at so far work pretty well for a 4 to 6 player game. However, you may have a different number of players available and the rules change ever so slightly. This is in order that the game remains balanced. Now in a 2 or 3 player game, each person chooses 2 characters. The deck is shuffled and certain cards are discarded at the start, then the deck is handed round. Each person chooses 1 card. The deck is then handed round a second time and everybody chooses a second. This means that each person will have 2 goes per turn, each in the normal order that their character would take their go. The game actually progresses normally from that point on, except that each person will then be having 2 turns, each of those characters only having access to the same gold, deck and district pool. This means you can combo up 2 characters with supporting special abilities in order to complement each other. The other change in a 2 or 3 player game is that after the king has shuffled the deck and it comes time to discard a card, he'll only place 1 face down and none face up. In a 7 player game, once the last person has been handed their card, unfortunately they'll only be handed 1 character card. In order that the game still remains fair, that 7th player will be allowed to look at the already discarded face down character card and choose which of the 2 he'd like. He'll then discard the other face down. As already mentioned, Citadels ships with its first expansion, Dark City, already in the box. This takes the form of new character cards and also new district cards. The expansion district cards, identified by a star in the top corner, work much the same way as the purple cards from the base game, and as such all of the special rules are contained on the card in their entirety. You can include between 2 and 3 of these cards, and that is obviously going to be a decision you'll make with the rest of your group. If you'd like to include more of these, you'll have to remove an equal number of cards from the basic box game. These will have to be purple as well. The additional character cards are handled in much the same way. In order to include a new card, you have to remove its corresponding card from the base game. For example, if I want to use the tax collector, which is number 2, I'd have to remove the thief, which is also number 2. There are also 2 cards in this deck which contain a number 9. These can be added straight into the game. You choose one of these and that will just be added on to the existing 8. This also means that you can expand the game to include 8 players rather than the previous 7. The additional rules for the 8th person are the same as the ones that we previously used for a 7-player game. Now, most of the rules for these cards are fairly self-explanatory, but there are 3 which I think could use some clarification. The first one is the witch, the next is the diplomat, and the final one is the artist. Now, when you're the witch, you get to nominate 1 character to be bewitched, very similar to the assassin mechanic. You then take 1 action and end your turn. This might seem like you're missing out a little bit, but this gets remedied later on, as when that character rears their head, they will only take 1 action and then end their turn. This means they don't get to build anything, and they also won't be allowed to use their character's special ability. The witch then gets to pick up where they left off. They can build a district, and they can also, as a twist, use the character's special ability of the person they've just bewitched. For example, if you've bewitched the Warlord, you'll get to destroy an enemy district using your own gold. If you've chosen the merchant to bewitch, you get to gain 1 gold for each of the green districts you have in play. Now the diplomat is a little like the warlord, except rather than destroying an enemy district, you get a chance to steal them instead. At the end of your turn, you can elect one enemy district and one of your own, and then they swap. The thing is though, that if the enemy district was worth more gold than yours was, you have to pay the difference from your stash to the other player, not the bank. Now for the artist, you get to choose one or two of your districts to beautify. This means that you can take gold from your own stash and place one on each of those cards. This increases the value of the card. Now this increased value counts for scoring, but also any other character ability which actually relates to the gold value, such as the Diplomat and the Warlord. Okay, that's it for Citadels. Now after several playthroughs of the game, we've inevitably found some things that work quite well and other things that actually could be improved upon. The first thing that we really loved is the fact that the game is very dynamic. The opportunity to change your character every turn means that if you've made some fairly unwise choices early on, you're not stuck with the same special abilities through the rest of the game. It also means that every playthrough of the game is fairly unique. The other thing we quite liked was the fact that as well as methods of getting ahead in the game, there are also mechanics which allow you to hinder other players, even decrease the lead of somebody who's doing very well. This means that no matter how far you are through the game, there's always a chance to pull it back. The only thing we found that didn't work very well was that early on in the game, it's fairly easy to see what sort of tactics people are employing. This is due to the limitations of the options available at that point in the game. That's it from us at Skip the Rules. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen today. If you found it useful, please hit like. If you'd like to see more from Skip the Rules, hit subscribe. If you want to find out more about us, please either click on the link below or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Join us next time for your chance to jump straight into your favourite board game without having to do any of that tedious rule reading. See you later. The king will then quell wall.
Energy.
The king.
Sorry.
No.
The power of 10 bears.
The gun show.